My son wrote, "Only my wife's parents are invited for Christmas. We don't want to see you." I silently nodded. In the morning, they found out that all their accounts were blocked by me. I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. I thought I knew what happiness looked like. For 68 years, I had built my life brick by brick. A successful career as a school principal, a comfortable home in suburban Connecticut, and most importantly, a loving relationship with my only son, David. After my husband Richard passed away 5 years ago, David became my anchor, or so I believed. The changes started subtly about 2 years after David married Jessica. At first, I attributed it to the natural adjustment of a new marriage. They were busy with their careers. David as a corporate lawyer, Jessica as a marketing executive. I understood I had been young once, consumed by ambition and responsibility. But understanding didn't make the growing distance any easier to bear. The phone calls became shorter. The Sunday dinners I used to host became monthly then quarterly. Mom were just so swamped. David would say, his voice apologetic but distant. Jessica rarely spoke to me directly anymore, communicating through David as if I were a client rather than family. When they did visit, Jessica's smile never quite reached her eyes. She would check her phone, constantly making comments about my old-fashioned furniture, or suggesting I might be more comfortable in a retirement community. I tried to be the mother-in-law everyone claims they want. Unobtrusive, generous understanding. When they mentioned financial stress from their new house in Westchester, I didn't hesitate. I had been fortunate in life, prudent with investments Richard and I had made together. Over the past 3 years, I had helped them significantly. A down payment here, a car loan there, emergency funds for Jessica's failed business venture. The amounts were substantial, but they were family. My family. Then came Thanksgiving. I had prepared for weeks, excited to host them, as I had done every year since David was born. At 2 p.m., my phone rang. It was David, his voice tight and uncomfortable. "Mom, about Thanksgiving. Jessica's parents really want us there this year. You understand, right?" I did understand. I understood that I was being erased piece by piece, but I said nothing. I spent Thanksgiving alone, staring at a turkey meant for 3, wondering when exactly I had become disposable to my own son. December arrived with its usual festive chaos, neighborhood lights twinkling. Carol singers on street corners, the scent of pine and cinnamon everywhere. I had always loved Christmas. Richard and I had made it magical for David when he was young. Even after Richard died, David and I maintained our traditions. It was our time, sacred and unchanging. Or so I thought. The text message arrived on December 10th at 9:47 p.m. Not even a phone call. A text message. "Mom, about Christmas. Jessica's parents are coming to stay with us. It's going to be their Christmas. Family only. We'll catch up with you in the new year. Hope you understand." My hands trembled as I read it. Family only. As if I weren't family. As if I hadn't given birth to him, raised him, sacrificed for him. As if the past 68 years meant nothing. I called him immediately. He answered on the 5th ring, his voice weary. "David, I don't understand. Christmas has always been our time. Can't we at least have Christmas Eve together?" There was a pause, then muffled voices in the background. Jessica's voice, sharp and insistent. When David spoke again, his tone had changed, harder, almost hostile. "Mom, you need to accept that things are different now. I have a wife. Her family matters too. You're being selfish. Selfish." The word hit me like a physical blow. "I've never asked you for anything except time." "That's not true." His voice rose, and I heard Jessica's influence in every syllable. "You're always guilt-tripping me, always making me feel bad." Jessica says, "You're manipulative." And honestly, I'm starting to see it. My heart pounded in my chest. "David, that's not fair. We don't want you there for Christmas, Mom. We need space. We just need you to back off." The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen, the phone still pressed to my ear, staring at the Christmas decorations I had already put up, the little ornaments David had made in elementary school, the stocking with his name embroidered in red thread, the framed photo of the three of us, Richard, David, and me, taken 20 years ago when life still made sense. I nodded to myself in the empty room, a silent acknowledgement of a truth I could no longer deny. I had lost my son. But as I sat down at my kitchen table, something else began to crystallize in my mind. A cold, clear realization that would change everything. They had underestimated me. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at Richard's old desk in the study, the one I had kept exactly as he left it, and pulled out my financial records. If I was going to be treated like a transaction, then perhaps it was time to view this relationship through the same lens. The numbers told a story I had been too blind or too hopeful to see clearly. 3 years ago, $85,000 for the down payment on their Westchester house. David had promised to pay me back within 2 years. He never did. When I gently mentioned it once, Jessica had laughed and said, "Oh, Margaret, you can't put a price on family. Can you, 2 years ago, $35,000 for Jessica's boutique marketing agency that folded within 8 months. It's an investment in our future, Mom," David had said. The future apparently didn't include my returns. 18 months ago, $42,000 for David's luxury SUV because Jessica insisted his old car was embarrassing for a lawyer of his caliber 1 year ago. $28,000 for what David called unexpected expenses, which I later learned through a casual comment from Jessica's sister, meant a vacation to Bali and new furniture. 6 months ago. $15,000 for emergency medical bills that I now suspected were cosmetic procedures for Jessica. The total came to $25,000. $25,000 of my retirement savings given freely because I loved my son and wanted to help him succeed. How naive I had been. How utterly, pathetically naive. But it wasn't just the money, though God knows that was substantial enough. It was the systematic erosion of my place in David's life. Every boundary Jessica pushed David allowed. Every family event I was excluded from, he justified. Every promise broken. Every visit canceled. Every phone call cut short. I had given them everything, and they had given me exile. My hands shook with something I hadn't felt in years. Rage. Pure, cold, clarifying rage. Richard used to say I was too soft-hearted, too willing to see the best in people. Margaret, he'd tell me with that gentle smile of his, "One day, someone is going to mistake your kindness for weakness. Don't let them walk all over you." I had laughed it off then. Richard had always been the pragmatic one, the businessman, while I was the nurturer, the peacemaker. "Well, Richard," I thought bitterly, "you were right, but I wasn't going to be walked over anymore." I pulled up the bank records on my computer, my fingers moving with surprising steadiness. David and Jessica didn't know the full extent of what I had done for them. Not legally, anyway. When I had helped with the house down payment, I had been listed as a co-signer on their mortgage due to their insufficient credit at the time. It was meant to be temporary just until they refinanced. They never had the car loan also in my name because David's debt-to-income ratio was too high. The emergency funds I had transferred those had gone into a joint account. I had helped David set up years ago an account I still had access to, though I had never thought to use it. Jessica's failed business. I had been listed as a guarantor on the commercial lease, a detail I had forgotten until now. I had left myself open to their manipulation. Yes, but in doing so, I had also retained leverage I hadn't even realized I possessed. A plan began to form in my mind, cold and precise. I wasn't going to beg for their love. I wasn't going to plead for a place at their Christmas table. I wasn't going to accept being erased from my son's life as if I were nothing more than an inconvenient obligation. No. If they wanted to treat me like a business transaction, then I would respond in kind. I opened a new document on my computer and began to type. My years as a school principal lending structure to my thoughts. I had spent decades managing budgets, navigating conflicts, and dealing with entitled parents who thought rules didn't apply to them. This was no different. This was simply a problem that required a solution. Step 1. Document everything. Every loan, every transfer, every promise made and broken. Step 2. Understand my legal position. I needed to know exactly what rights I had. Step 3. Take action. Decisive, irreversible action. The clock on the wall showed 4:27 a.m. when I finally closed my laptop. The winter dawn was still hours away, but I felt more awake than I had in months. Purpose, I realized, was its own kind of energy. I thought about David's text message again. We don't want you there for Christmas. Fine, but they were going to learn that every choice has consequences, and some consequences couldn't be smoothed over with apologies or excuses. I had been a mother for 38 years, a wife for 43, a school principal for 35. I had navigated bureaucracies, balanced budgets, and stood up to people who underestimated me my entire professional life. Jessica and David were about to discover that I hadn't forgotten how. By the time the sun rose over Connecticut, my first calls were already planned. My attorney's office opened at 9:00 a.m. I intended to be his first appointment. Gerald Hutchkins had been our family attorney for 20 years. He had handled Richard's estate, my will, and various property matters over the years. He was thorough, discreet, and most importantly, he knew my family's history. When I called his office at precisely 9:00 a.m., his secretary put me through immediately. Margaret. Gerald's voice was warm with familiarity. This is a surprise. What can I do for you? I need to discuss some financial matters, Gerald. Urgently, can you see me today? There must have been something in my tone because he didn't hesitate. Come in at 11. I'll clear my schedule. His office in downtown Hartford was exactly as I remembered. Mahogany furniture walls lined with law books and the faint smell of old paper and leather. Gerald himself was in his early 70s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed. He gestured me to a chair and poured 2 cups of coffee without asking. You look like you haven't slept, he observed. I haven't. I set down my folder of documents. I need to know what legal recourse I have regarding loans I made to my son and daughter-in-law. His eyebrows rose slightly, but he said nothing. Simply opened the folder and began reading. The silence stretched for nearly 20 minutes as he examined every document, every bank transfer, every piece of correspondence. Finally, he looked up. Margaret, this is substantial. Over $200,000. I'm aware. And you're listed as co-signer on the mortgage primary account holder on the car loan and guarantor on a commercial lease. Did David and Jessica know you retained these positions? I assume they forgot or didn't care. Gerald leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Legally, you have significant leverage here. As co-signer on the mortgage, you have the right to call the loan due, if payments aren't made according to terms. As primary on the car loan, the vehicle is technically your property, the commercial lease. He paused. That one's more complicated, but you're not liable for the debt. The business entity is. However, your signature gives you standing. What about the direct transfers? Those are trickier. Gifts have different legal standing than loans. However, he tapped one document. This email from David where he specifically writes, "We'll pay you back as soon as we can." That transforms at least $85,000 from a gift into a documented loan. My heart was beating faster. So I can demand repayment, you can. And if they can't pay, which I suspect they can't, you have options. You could place liens on their property, freeze certain accounts, or he met my eyes, you could call in the debts which might force them into serious financial difficulty. Would that make me legally liable for their hardship? No. You'd be exercising your legitimate rights as a creditor. The question isn't legal, Margaret. It's personal. Are you sure you want to do this? I thought of David's voice on the phone. We don't want you there for Christmas, Mom. I'm sure. Gerald nodded slowly. Then we'll need to send formal demand letters, document everything, and prepare for potential legal action. This will take a few days to set up properly. I'd recommend we send the first notices on Monday, December 13th. That's perfect. As I left Gerald's office, my phone buzzed. A text from David. "Mom, sorry about last night. I was stressed, but our decision stands about Christmas. Hope you understand." I didn't respond. That evening, as I was preparing dinner, my phone rang. It was Sarah Chen, an old colleague from my principal days and one of my closest friends. I had texted her earlier asking if we could meet. "Margaret, I got your message. Are you all right?" "You sounded strange. We met at a quiet restaurant in West Hartford. Over wine and pasta, I told her everything. The loans, the exclusion, David's transformation under Jessica's influence." Sarah listened without interruption, her expression growing darker. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You're doing the right thing." Sometimes love means setting boundaries, even if it hurts. I keep wondering if I'm being vindictive. Vindictive would be destroying them for revenge. You're simply protecting yourself from being exploited. There's a difference. As we left the restaurant, Sarah hugged me tightly. "Call me if you need anything anytime." That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. On Saturday morning, December 11th, something unexpected happened. My doorbell rang at 10:00 a.m. I opened it to find Jessica standing on my porch alone, wearing an expression that was almost friendly. "Margaret, I hope I'm not disturbing you. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by." Jessica had never visited me alone. Never. Every instinct I had screamed warning. "Come in," I said carefully. She settled on my living room couch with practiced elegance, accepting my offer of tea, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. We made small talk about the weather, about Christmas shopping, about nothing of consequence. Then she leaned forward, her voice dropping to something almost conspiratorial. "Margaret, I want to apologize for how things have been. I know David was harsh on the phone. He's just under so much pressure at work, and I think he took it out on you." She paused. "The thing is, we're going through a really difficult time financially. David didn't want to worry you, but his firm might be doing layoffs and we're stretched so thin already." There it was, another request for money wrapped in manipulation and false concern. But this time, I had something I hadn't had before. My phone, sitting face up on the coffee table between us, was recording everything. I had started the voice memo app before opening the door, a precaution born from years of dealing with difficult parents who later claimed I had said things I hadn't. So I was hoping Jessica continued that maybe you could help us one more time. Just $30,000 to get us through the next few months. I know you've been so generous, and we really do appreciate it even if we don't say it enough. Her smile widened. And of course, after Christmas, we'll make more effort to include you. Maybe a nice dinner in January. Financial manipulation, emotional blackmail, and a promise she had no intention of keeping. All recorded. I smiled at her. A smile I had perfected over 35 years of dealing with people who underestimated me. Jessica. That's such a thoughtful visit. Let me think about it. She left 20 minutes later, clearly satisfied that she had secured her next withdrawal from the Bank of Margaret. She had no idea what was coming. On Monday morning, Gerald's office would send the demand letters, and the game would truly begin. Monday morning, December 13th, began like any other winter day in Connecticut. Gray skies, frost on the windows, the distant sound of traffic. But for David and Jessica, it was the morning their world began to collapse. Gerald had been thorough. By 9:00 a.m., 3 separate demand letters had been delivered via certified mail and email. One regarding the mortgage co-signature and demanding either removal of my name or full repayment of the $85,000 down payment I had provided. One regarding the car loan which I was calling due immediately, and one formally documenting all financial transfers as loans rather than gifts with a demand for a repayment plan within 30 days. By 1:00 a.m., Gerald had also initiated a freeze on the joint account that still had my name on it, an account containing roughly $12,000 of what David and Jessica considered their money. I was in my kitchen drinking coffee and reading when my phone exploded with calls. First David, then Jessica, then David again. I let them all go to voicemail. Finally, a text from David in all caps. "What the hell did you do? Call me now." I waited 2 hours before calling back. David answered on the first ring. "Mom, what is this? Are you insane? You're trying to take our house, our car." His voice was frantic, angry, scared. "Good. I'm not trying to take anything, David. I'm simply asking for what I'm legally owed. You borrowed money from me. I'd like it back. Borrowed. You gave it to us. You said it was to help us. And it was. But you promised to pay me back. You said as soon as we can. Do you remember that email David, my attorney, certainly does? There was a choking sound on the other end. You went to a lawyer against your own son. I went to a lawyer to protect my financial interests after being excluded from your life and treated like an ATM machine. There's a difference. This is Jessica's doing, isn't it?" His voice turned venomous. "She always said you were controlling and manipulative." "Jessica," I interrupted coldly, "came to my house 2 days ago asking for another $30,000 after you told me I wasn't wanted at Christmas. After 3 years of taking my money without a single payment back. So please, David, tell me more about who's manipulative." Silence. Then Jessica's voice in the background, sharp and angry. The phone muffled as they argued. When David came back, his tone had changed. Harder, more threatening. "You do this, you'll never see us again. Never meet your grandchildren if we have them. You'll die alone, Mom. Is that what you want?" The words should have hurt. Perhaps they would have a week ago. Now they simply confirmed everything I already knew. If your love was conditional on my money, David, then I never had you anyway. The letters stand. You have 30 days. I hung up. Within an hour, they were at my door. Both of them dressed in their expensive clothes, bought with my money faces flushed with rage. I watched through the window as they rang the doorbell repeatedly, David shouting, "Mom, open the door, we need to talk about this." I didn't move from my kitchen table. Margaret. That was Jessica. Her voice shrill. You can't do this. We'll fight you. We'll tell everyone what kind of person you really are. Still, I sat silent, unmoved. They stayed for 20 minutes, their voices growing more desperate, their threats more wild. Jessica threatened to go to the police. David threatened to sue me. Jessica claimed I was mentally incompetent. David pounded on the door hard enough that I worried about the frame. Finally, blessedly, they left. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing. Despite my cold exterior, despite my careful planning, the confrontation had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. These were people I had loved, people I had trusted, and they had come to my home not to apologize, not to make amends, but to intimidate me into submission. I called Sarah. She came over immediately, took one look at my face, and wrapped me in a hug. You did the right thing, she said firmly. Don't let them make you doubt that. That night, I unplugged my phone. The next day, I ignored all emails. For 3 days, I gave myself permission to simply breathe, to process, to grieve for the relationship I had lost, or perhaps had never truly had. I went to yoga classes I had been neglecting. I had lunch with old friends. I sat in my living room and allowed myself to cry for the son I had raised, the boy who had once told me I was his hero. That boy was gone, or perhaps he had never existed the way I remembered. On Thursday, December 16th, I turned my phone back on. 73 missed calls, 42 text messages, most from David and Jessica, ranging from apologetic to threatening to bizarrely cheerful, as if nothing had happened. One message, however, stood out. It was from David's number, but the tone was different. Margaret, this is Robert Miller, David's senior partner at the firm. I hope we can discuss this matter reasonably. Perhaps lunch tomorrow. I think there's been a misunderstanding that we can resolve. So they were bringing in reinforcements. How predictable. I texted back, Mr. Miller, any communication should go through my attorney, Gerald Hutchkins. Thank you. I felt stronger now, steadier. The 3 days of rest had given me perspective and renewed determination. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot, but I was ready for whatever came next. The attempts at manipulation came from unexpected directions. On Friday morning, I received a call from Patricia Holbrook, a woman I vaguely knew from church, but had never been particularly close to. Her voice was sweet, concerned, laced with false intimacy. Margaret, dear, I heard about the terrible misunderstanding between you and David. You know, family conflicts can be so painful. I went through something similar with my daughter, and I found that forgiveness and flexibility are so important. Sometimes we have to be the bigger person. Let things go for the sake of peace. I recognized Jessica's fingerprints all over this. Patricia's daughter worked in marketing, almost certainly knew Jessica professionally. Patricia, I appreciate your concern, but this isn't a matter for forgiveness. This is a matter of respect and financial responsibility. Oh, but Margaret, at our age, is money really worth losing your son over? At my age, Patricia, I've learned that people who truly love you don't require payment for their presence. I hung up before she could respond. The same afternoon, I received an email from someone claiming to be a financial counselor offering free mediation services for family financial disputes. The email address, however, traced back to an IP address in Westchester County. How sloppy. Then came the letters. 3 of them delivered over the weekend, each handwritten on expensive stationery. The first was from Jessica's mother, Martha, whom I had met exactly twice. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive manipulation. Dear Margaret, Jessica has told me about your recent actions, and I must say I'm shocked. Family is everything, and money is just money. Surely you don't want to drive your only son away over something so trivial. When you're older and alone, you'll regret this." The second was from David himself, and it nearly broke my resolve. "Mom, I'm sorry for how I spoke to you. You raised me better than that. I've been under incredible stress, and Jessica and I have been struggling in ways I haven't told you about. Can we please meet and talk? Just the two of us like old times. I miss you. I miss Dad. I miss who we used to be. Please give me a chance to make this right." My hands trembled as I read it. This was the son I remembered, vulnerable, honest, reaching out. For a moment, I almost picked up the phone. Then I noticed the postscript at the bottom. "P.S. If you could pause the legal action for just a few weeks while we figure things out, I promise we'll work something out that's fair for everyone." And there, it was the real agenda. The emotional manipulation designed to make me lower my guard while they figured out how to escape the consequences of their choices. I set the letter aside and didn't respond. The third letter was the most interesting. It was from Jessica, and it didn't even pretend to be apologetic. "Margaret, I don't know what game you think you're playing, but you will lose. David is successful, connected, and well-respected. You're a retired school principal living alone. Who do you think people will believe? Who do you think will have sympathy? The struggling young couple or the bitter old woman trying to control her son with money? Stop this now before you embarrass yourself further." I actually laughed when I read it. Jessica had finally dropped the mask entirely. This was who she really was. Calculating, cruel, confident in her ability to manipulate any situation. She had no idea how badly she had miscalculated. That evening, I met Sarah for dinner at a small Italian restaurant we both loved. I brought the letters with me, and she read them, all her expression darkening. "This is textbook emotional abuse," Sarah said flatly. She had been a school counselor before retiring and recognized manipulation when she saw it. David's letter, especially the love bombing, followed immediately by a demand. "It's designed to destabilize you. I know, and it almost worked. Almost only counts in horseshoes." Sarah raised her wine glass. "You're doing the right thing, Margaret. Don't let them gaslight you into thinking otherwise." Over the next few days, I found support in unexpected places. My book club, when they heard a vague outline of what was happening, rallied around me with fierce loyalty. My neighbor Tom, a retired judge, offered legal advice over coffee. My former teaching colleagues sent messages of encouragement. One message particularly touched me. It was from Marcus, a former student I had mentored who was now a successful software engineer. "Mrs. Patterson, I heard you're going through a tough time. I just wanted to say thank you for never letting me make excuses, for holding me accountable even when it was hard, and for teaching me that self-respect isn't selfish. You changed my life. Stand your ground." I cried reading that. Real tears, not of sadness, but of validation. I had spent my life teaching people to be strong, to stand up for themselves, to not be victims. Now it was time to live those lessons myself. On Tuesday, December 21st, 4 days before Christmas, I received a voicemail from David. His voice was cold, controlled, nothing like his previous emotional appeals. "Mom, you've made your position clear." "Fine. We've made ours clear too. Don't expect to hear from us again. Enjoy your principles. I hope they keep you warm." I saved the voicemail. Not because it hurt, though it did, but because it was evidence of their true character when manipulation failed. That night, I decorated my Christmas tree. Not the sad, half-hearted decoration of someone resigned to loneliness, but a full, joyful expression of celebration. I put on Bing Crosby Christmas carols. I made myself hot chocolate. I allowed myself to feel peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for someone else's approval to be happy. I was simply living. Christmas Eve arrived cold and clear. I had made peace with spending it alone, or rather, I had chosen to spend it alone. Sarah had invited me to her family gathering, but I declined. This Christmas, I needed to prove to myself that I could be whole without needing anyone's validation. I was preparing dinner, a modest but lovely meal for one, when the doorbell rang at 6 p.m. Through the window, I saw David and Jessica on my porch. They were dressed nicely, not casually. David held a wrapped gift. Jessica's face was carefully neutral, almost pleasant. They had clearly strategized this visit. Every instinct told me not to open the door, but some small part of me, the part that still remembered David as a child that still held hope, made me unlock it. "Mom." David's voice was gentle, almost his old self. "Can we come in, please? Just to talk, no fighting." "It's Christmas Eve." I stepped aside and let them enter. They settled in my living room, Jessica perching on the edge of the sofa with practiced grace, David in the armchair where Richard used to sit. The wrapped gift, medium-sized, professionally wrapped, sat on the coffee table between us like a peace offering. "We wanted to apologize," David began. And for a moment, I almost believed him. Things got out of hand. We said things we didn't mean. And on Christmas Eve, it just felt wrong to let this continue. "We've been thinking," Jessica added, her smile carefully calibrated, "that maybe we can work something out. Some kind of payment plan for the money you lent us. Something reasonable that doesn't involve lawyers and threats." I said nothing, simply watched them. David leaned forward. "The thing is, Mom, these legal demands, they're destroying us. Jessica's been having panic attacks. I can't concentrate at work. We might lose the house. Is that really what you want, to see your son homeless?" The emotional manipulation was skillful, I had to admit. The tremor in David's voice, the way Jessica's eyes glistened with what might have been tears, the careful invocation of my maternal instincts. "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked quietly. Jessica's smile brightened. "We pay you back $1,000 a month. It'll take a while, but we'll be consistent. And in exchange, you drop all the legal action, unfreeze the account, and we all just move forward. Start fresh." I did the math in my head. At $1,000 a month, it would take over 17 years to repay $200,000. And that wasn't even counting interest. They'd be in their 50s. I'd likely be dead. "And what about Christmas?" I asked. "What about being part of your lives?" David and Jessica exchanged a glance. There was something in that look, a silent communication, a shared understanding that told me everything I needed to know. "We can work on that," David said carefully, "but we need you to understand that our relationship needs boundaries, healthy boundaries. You can't use money to control us, and we need our space as a couple." "Healthy boundaries," I repeated softly, "like excluding me from holidays, like taking my money for years and then treating me like I'm the problem." Jessica's expression flickered. Just for a second, the mask slipped, and I saw the contempt underneath. She caught herself quickly, but it was too late. "Margaret, we're trying to be reasonable." "No," I interrupted, my voice hardening. "You're trying to manipulate me again. This entire visit is a performance. The gift, the apologies, the tears, it's all calculated to make me drop my legal action so you can go back to taking my money without consequences." David's face flushed. "That's not true. Then answer me this. If I drop the legal action right now, will I be invited to Christmas dinner tomorrow? Silence. The kind of silence that speaks volumes." Jessica stood abruptly, her pleasant facade cracking. This is exactly what I told David. You can't be reasoned with. You're not interested in family. You're interested in punishment. You're a bitter, lonely old woman who uses money to manipulate people because it's the only power you have left. Jessica David started, but she was on a roll now, her voice rising. No, David, she needs to hear this. She's been playing the victim, but look at what she's doing. She's trying to destroy us. Take our home, our car, our security, all because her feelings were hurt. This isn't about love or family. This is about control. This is about an old woman who can't accept that her son grew up and chose his wife over his mommy. The venom in her words was shocking in its intensity. David looked horrified, but he didn't contradict her. He didn't defend me. He just sat there torn between his wife and his mother, ultimately choosing silence. I stood up slowly, walked to the door, and opened it. "Get out of my house, Mom," David started. "Get out." Jessica grabbed her purse and stalked out her heels, clicking sharply on my hardwood floor. David lingered, his face anguished. She didn't mean. She meant every word, and you let her say it. You sat there and let your wife speak to your mother that way. So yes, David, get out. He left. The gift remained on my coffee table unopened. After they were gone, I locked the door and leaned against it, my whole body shaking, not with sadness, with rage. Pure, clarifying rage. They had come to my home on Christmas Eve not to reconcile, but to manipulate me one final time. They had offered false peace, false promises, false hope, all designed to make me abandon my position so they could return to exploiting me. Jessica's words echoed in my mind. An old woman who uses money to manipulate people because it's the only power you have left. The projection was almost funny. She had just described herself. I walked to my phone and texted Gerald. No settlements, no compromises. Take this all the way. His response came within minutes. Understood. Merry Christmas, Margaret. You're doing the right thing. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I didn't question my choices. Instead, I ate my Christmas Eve dinner, drank a glass of Richard's favorite wine, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. The meeting took place on January 12th in Gerald's conference room, a neutral space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Hartford. David and Jessica arrived with their attorney, a young man named Bradley Stevens, who looked like he'd just passed the bar and was already in over his head. I arrived with Gerald, who carried 2 thick folders of documentation. The tension in the room was palpable. Jessica wouldn't look at me. David stared at the table. Their attorney attempted a professional smile that didn't quite land. "Thank you all for coming." Gerald began, his voice measured and calm. "I believe we can resolve this matter efficiently if everyone approaches it honestly." Bradley Stevens cleared his throat. "My clients are prepared to offer a reasonable settlement. They acknowledge that there may have been miscommunications about the financial arrangements, and they're willing to establish a payment plan. $200,000, Gerald interrupted smoothly, plus interest accrued since the dates of the loans. That comes to approximately $223,000. Your clients have 30 days to pay in full, or we proceed with legal action to enforce collection through liens, asset seizure, and garnishment of wages." Jessica's head snapped up. "That's insane. We don't have that kind of money." "Then perhaps you shouldn't have borrowed it," I said quietly. David finally looked at me, his expression pleading. "Mom, please be reasonable. We can't possibly let me show you something," I said, pulling out my phone. I placed it on the table and pressed play. Jessica's voice filled the conference room. "So I was hoping that maybe you could help us one more time. Just $30,000 to get us through the next few months. I know you've been so generous, and we really do appreciate it, even if we don't say it enough. And of course, after Christmas, we'll make more effort to include you. Maybe a nice dinner in January." The color drained from Jessica's face. This recording, Gerald explained, was made on December 11th, one day after David told Margaret she wasn't welcome at Christmas. It demonstrates a clear pattern of financial manipulation, emotional exploitation, and false promises. "That's illegal," Jessica burst out. "You can't record someone without their permission." Actually, Gerald said with a slight smile, "Connecticut is a one-party consent state. Margaret was fully within her rights to record a conversation taking place in her own home. And this recording transforms several of the cash transfers from gifts into documented loans, as it establishes a pattern of borrowing with implied repayment." Bradley Stevens looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. "Let me confer with my clients." "There's more," I said coldly. I pulled out a stack of printed documents, text messages, emails, bank statements, a 3-year pattern of taking my money while systematically excluding me from your lives, taking and taking and taking, then calling me manipulative when I finally said no. I slid one particular email across the table, the one where David had written, "We'll pay you back as soon as we can about the house down payment. Every lawyer in Connecticut will see this as a loan, not a gift. You promised repayment in writing." David's hands were shaking. "Mom, we didn't mean..." "What didn't you mean, David?" "The exclusion, the insults, the attempt to manipulate me on Christmas Eve. Which part didn't you mean?" Jessica suddenly stood her chair, scraping loudly. "You're a spiteful old who can't accept that David chose me over you. This whole thing is about jealousy and control." The room went silent. Gerald's voice was ice. "Miss Miller, I strongly suggest you compose yourself. Outbursts like that in a legal proceeding don't help your case. Legal proceeding. This isn't a courtroom. Not yet." Gerald agreed. "But it will be if we can't reach an agreement today." Bradley Stevens finally found his voice. "What exactly are you proposing?" Gerald opened one of his folders. "Full repayment of $223,000 within 30 days. If they cannot pay in full, we will accept the following: immediate surrender of the vehicle purchased with Margaret's money, removal of Margaret's name from the mortgage with full reimbursement of the down payment she provided, and a structured settlement for the remaining balance secured by liens on any other assets they possess." "That will destroy our credit," David exclaimed. "Then you should have paid your debts," I said simply. Jessica was shaking with rage now, her carefully maintained composure completely shattered. "You know what? Fine. Take the car. Take whatever you want, but you'll never see us again. Never. When we have children, they won't even know you exist. You'll die alone and we won't even come to your funeral." I met her eyes steadily. "Jessica, I stopped caring about your presence in my life the moment I realized it was conditional on my money. You and David aren't the prizes you think you are." David stood abruptly. "Mom, how can I, what David protect myself from being exploited, stand up for myself when I'm treated like garbage, refuse to be your ATM machine? Which of these things should I not do?" He had no answer. He simply stood there, the full weight of his choices finally crashing down on him. Gerald closed his folder. "We'll need your decision within 48 hours. Full payment asset surrender or we file suit. Those are your options." Bradley Stevens nodded weakly. We'll need to discuss with our clients." As they filed out, Jessica turned at the door, her face twisted with hatred. "I hope you're happy, Margaret. You won. You destroyed your own son's life." I hope it was worth it. I didn't respond. The door closed behind them. Gerald turned to me. That went better than I expected. Better. They have no defense. The documentation is ironclad. They'll have to settle. I looked out the window at the gray January sky. Somewhere out there, David and Jessica were realizing that consequences were real, that manipulation had limits, that mothers weren't infinite wells of forgiveness and money. Good, I said quietly. For the first time in months, I felt truly, genuinely good. They didn't wait 48 hours. By the next morning, Bradley Stevens had called Gerald with their surrender. They couldn't pay in full. No surprise there. Their actual liquid assets amounted to less than $15,000. The rest of their wealth was tied up in the house they couldn't afford, the furniture they'd financed, and the lifestyle they'd built on credit and my money. The settlement was brutal but fair. The car, a luxury SUV worth $42,000, was surrendered immediately. Gerald arranged for it to be sold with proceeds going directly to me. David and Jessica refinanced the house, removing my name from the mortgage. To do so, they had to take a cash-out refinance at a terrible interest rate because of their debt-to-income ratio. But they managed to scrape together $85,000 to repay the down payment I'd provided. The remaining balance, approximately $96,000, was structured as a formal loan with market-rate interest secured by liens on their property and future earnings. Payments were set at $2,500 per month for the next 4 years. If they missed a single payment, the entire balance became due immediately, and I could pursue collection through wage garnishment or property seizure. Gerald was masterful in the negotiations. Every clause was airtight. Every protection was in place. There were no loopholes, no escape hatches. By January 30th, the settlement was finalized. The first payment of $2,500 was due February 15th. On February 1st, the car sale cleared, depositing $39,500 into my account. The refinancing went through on February 10th, and $85,000 landed in my savings account. I had recovered $124,500 of my $25,000 in less than 2 months. The rest would come slowly, but it would come. Every single penny. The impact on David and Jessica was immediate and devastating. Through mutual acquaintances, not because I asked, but because people talked, I learned that Jessica had to take a second job. David was working 60-hour weeks not because of ambition, but because they desperately needed the overtime. The Westchester house that had been their pride and joy became their prison. Too expensive to maintain, impossible to sell without taking a massive loss that would still leave them owing me money. Their social life evaporated. No more expensive dinners, no more weekend trips, no more designer clothes. They were trapped on a treadmill of debt and consequences. Sarah Chen reported seeing Jessica at a discount grocery store looking exhausted and haggarded, her designer bags replaced with reusable shopping totes, her expression one of barely suppressed rage. She saw me, Sarah told me over coffee, and you should have seen her face. Pure hatred. She actually said, "I hope you're proud of what your friend did to us," as if you'd done something to them rather than simply stopped letting them do things to you. I felt no guilt, no regret, only a quiet satisfaction that natural consequences had finally caught up with people who thought they were above them. In March, I received a letter from David. Not an email, not a text. A handwritten letter, his handwriting shakier than I remembered. "Mom, I don't expect forgiveness. I'm writing this because my therapist suggested it might help me process what happened, not because I think you'll care. You were right about everything. Jessica and I took advantage of you. We justified it by telling ourselves, you were wealthy, You were retired. You wouldn't miss the money. We convinced ourselves we deserved your help because we were family. The truth is, we became entitled. We stopped seeing you as a person and started seeing you as a resource. And when you stopped being useful, we discarded you. Jessica and I are in Q's therapy now. We're probably going to separate. It turns out when the money runs out and life gets hard, we don't actually like each other very much. Who knew? I don't know if I can ever repair what I broke. Not just with you, but with myself. I look in the mirror and don't recognize the person I became. I don't expect you to respond to this. I just wanted you to know that you taught me the most important lesson of my life, even if it took losing you to learn it. Respect isn't optional. Love isn't transactional, and consequences are real. I'm sorry for everything, David. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. I didn't respond. Some lessons need to be learned in silence. On April 15th, the first monthly payment arrived on time. On May 15th, the second payment arrived. Then June, July, August. Each payment was a reminder that I had stood my ground. Each payment was validation that I deserved respect. Each payment was proof that I was nobody's victim. By the time autumn arrived, I had recovered $139,500 of my original $25,000. The money was important, yes, but it was never really about the money. It was about dignity. It was about self-respect. It was about teaching the world and myself that Margaret Patterson was not someone to be trifled with. I had spent 68 years being kind, generous, and understanding. I had been the principal who believed in second chances, the mother who believed in unconditional love, the woman who believed that family meant everything. I had learned finally that all of those things were true, but they had limits. And when those limits were crossed, I was fully capable of defending them. In September, I heard through mutual connections that David and Jessica had officially separated. She had moved back in with her parents. He was living in the house alone, working constantly, barely maintaining the payments. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not sadness, not vindication, just nothing. They were no longer my concern. They were simply two people who had made choices and were living with the consequences. As I should have insisted from the beginning, I discovered something remarkable in the months following the settlement. I was happier alone than I had been while waiting for crumbs of affection from people who didn't value me. The first thing I did was redecorate. I hired a designer, and by October, my home had been transformed. Rich blues and emerald greens replaced the safe neutrals. The dining room became a bright studio where I started taking watercolor painting classes, something I'd always wanted to do. I traveled. In November, I took a 2-week trip to Portugal with Sarah. In December, I joined a group tour to Morocco. You're glowing. Sarah told me, I haven't seen you this alive in years. In January, I volunteered to mentor new teachers at my old school district. I joined a book club, a hiking group, and a local theater company. My calendar was full, not with obligations, but with choices. My home, once silent and sad, was frequently filled with friends. Meanwhile, David and Jessica's lives continued their downward spiral. Jessica's parents couldn't support her indefinitely. By March, she was renting a studio apartment, working 2 jobs, marketing and waitressing on weekends. She'd lost her polished appearance and had a brittle, angry energy that drove people away. David was drowning. The mortgage, utilities, maintenance, and monthly payments to me were too much. He'd been passed over for a promotion. A relationship with a paralegal ended when she learned about his financial mess. Marcus, my former student, reported, "Your son looks defeated." Mrs. Patterson, just an exhausted guy paying his debts, living in a house too big for him. In June, sitting in my newly landscaped garden, I allowed myself to think about David. I didn't hate him. I simply didn't wish anything for him anymore. He was a closed chapter. By August, I had recovered $154,500 of the original $25,000. The payments continued like clockwork. That was enough. It was everything. So what did I learn from all of this? I learned that love without respect is manipulation. I learned that generosity without boundaries is exploitation. And I learned that being a mother doesn't mean accepting mistreatment from your children, the hardest lesson. Sometimes protecting yourself means losing people you love. But here's the truth. They don't tell you. If someone's love is conditional on your silence about your own mistreatment, you never really had them in the first place. Today at 69, I'm happier than I've been in a decade. My life is full. My friendships are real, and my self-respect is intact. David makes his payments on time. We don't speak. Maybe someday that will change. Maybe it won't. Either way, I've learned that my happiness doesn't depend on his presence. So I have a question for you. What would you have done? Would you have forgiven them and dropped the legal action? Would you have demanded accountability like I did? Or would you have found a different path entirely? Think about the people in your own life who take without giving, who demand, without reciprocating, who love you only when it's convenient. What are you going to do about it? Leave a comment below, share your story, and if this resonated with you, subscribe for more. Sometimes the hardest stories are the ones we need to hear most. Thank you for listening to mine. Remember, you teach people how to treat you. Make sure you're teaching the right lessons